Hey, this is Tech Talk. I'm Rick Smith, editor of Local TechWire. Thank you for joining us. We have a very important subject to discuss today if you follow classical music on the radio. And with us today is Deborah Proctor, who is general manager of WCPE in Wake Forest. Deborah, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you.
Your station is known internationally as the classicalstation.org, right?
That's correct.
And I think you recently conducted a survey that showed you have listeners in 7 different continents.
Well, all 7 we do. We were very pleased to find out that the last one was Antarctica. We had someone on one of the supply ships restocking, the people there doing research, and we found out they were listening. So we were pleased to hit every continent on the planet.
Not many companies can say they have that kind of reach, and of course it's not from the strength of your signal out of your facilities in Wake Forest.
Oh, I wish it was.
But we're talking about delivering your music over the Internet.
The Internet is, right now, we are amazed at the number of people and the number of places where the Internet is reaching. It is truly the future for public radio, I think.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Now we have an issue before us that we're going to talk about today called the Internet Radio Equality Act, and that threatens to stifle, if you will, the amazing growth that you've experienced through the Internet.
Well, the act itself is a lifeboat for public radio. Public radio has some challenges, and the act is something that not only public radio stations are really reaching out for to save us, but also our small webcasters and independent college radio stations and small startup internet radio stations are hoping that this act will be passed, because we've got some big challenges with royalty rates.
And those stem from court cases, correct, where they've ordered stations to pay higher fees?
The history is that back in 1998, the copyright laws were revised to include Internet broadcasting. Back in 1976, radio began paying royalties for performances, royalties to performers. And in 1998, Internet broadcasting grew into its own, and Congress decided that there should be some kind of formulation for Internet radio stations. So the Digital Millennium Copyright Act was passed, and unfortunately, public radio wasn't placed in the same position in the 1976 law, and that put public radio at a disadvantage. Back in 1976, Congress realized that public radio was important to the people of the United States. It realized that public broadcasting performed a service, and that it was different than commercial broadcasting, so that its rights and royalty structure should be figured out in a different manner, because it didn't deal with advertising, it didn't deal with Hume or spots or commercial entities. But when the 1998 revision was added in to include Internet, that distinction wasn't made.
And so you're facing some expensive charges. I think you described it as a penny a second, but over a period of time it may not sound like much, but that's a lot of money.
That's right. When the group that made the decision earlier this year looked at the rates, they looked at a rate, say, for instance, of, I think it is 1/10 of a cent, for example, 1/10 of a cent per song per listener. And they figured, well, that's not too bad for public radio. They can deal with that. The problem is that if a public radio station has a few thousand listeners, that can amount to hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in fees, because all of this is cumulative. And we use the example of a penny a second. When you first think about it, if you're just taking a penny and throwing it in a bucket every second, the average person would think, well, I can handle that. But in fact, it mounts up to over $300,000 a year. So when you start asking a public radio station to pay even a fraction of a cent per work, per person, it becomes unbearable very quickly.
And in your case, with an international audience, the price would be even more onerous?
It becomes untenable. Another difficulty is we don't know exactly how many listeners we've got, so we would have to fall back to even a higher rate, which was set based on some guesses that they made for an average radio station that plays about 12 works an hour. Whereas if we're playing classical music, we may play only one concert an hour.
Right.
So we get stabbed in the back twice.
So from your station's perspective, the Internet Radio Equality Act is something that you support and that you're encouraging your listeners to contact their congressman about?
It is our lifeboat. It's our life preserver. We're encouraging all of our listeners, in fact, anyone who listens to public radio on the Internet at all. This is not just a WCPE issue. This affects every single public radio station that either now has an Internet stream or may ever in the future. And anyone who even anticipates that they may want to listen to public radio on the Internet needs to look into this and needs to contact both their two senators and their congressperson and get them to do something, because the hammer's going to come down.
What's the outlook for the legislation right now? Do you have a feel for it?
There are over 100 congressmen who have become co-sponsors of the bill, and that is good because there are 435 members of Congress, so we've got about roughly half as many as we need to get it through the House of Representatives. But on the Senate side, we need substantially more senators. The Senate has not taken up for public radio as much as the House has, which really surprises me.
Bottom line, if this legislation fails to pass and the new fee structure is implemented, does that mean drastic changes for WCPE right away?
A group of public broadcasters, including National Public Radio, the National Federation of Community Broadcasters, the Intercollegiate Broadcasting System, several more have gone to the District of Columbia court system and put in an emergency request for a stay. And they are appealing the Copyright Board's action here. That is probably going to take, that court case is probably going to take a year and a half. While it's pending, we've got a temporary hold on this, but there's no guarantee what that court's going to come up with. The real problem is that Congress didn't put Internet radio in the same place of the original 1976 law that they needed to. And so it's really going to take a congressional fix to take care of this situation.
And it might require a bipartisan solution, and we know that there is a serious lack of that in D.C. these days.
Well, fortunately, on the Internet Radio Equality Act, it has been introduced into the House and the Senate as bipartisan legislation.
Good. Well, WCPE and Deborah have been leaders in the use of the Internet to reach out globally with their signal and with their programming. hate to see something happen to that in the future as a result of this. But Deborah, thank you for coming in to talk to us today about this important issue.
Thank you.
And if they want to get more information about the Internet Radio Equality Act, is there a website they can go to?
We have information on our website, theclassicalstation.org, all one word, theclassicalstation.org. There are links there. You can find out how to contact your senators. You can find out how to contact your representatives. And you can tell your friends to check this out and give their people in Washington their input, because it affects public radio across the nation. And if they don't make their voice heard, it's going to come back to haunt you one day.
Okay. Well, Deborah, thank you for coming in to talking to us today about this important subject. This is Rick Smith. Thank you for watching.